In this video, we are going to create this landing page with Parallax Smooth Scroll using next.js and Lenis Smooth Scroll. So as you might notice just off the bat, the website content is sourced from a company called Lucid Motors, which makes electric vehicles, but I put my own twist on the design and structure of their website. So here's a quick demo of what we're going to build. So at the top, we have this full screen background video playing with a faded in navbar at the top. And as we scroll down, you'll notice a really nice parallax effect for these sections below here. And on top of all of that, you can see that the scrolling here is a smooth scroll, so a normal scroll behavior here. So that's a really nice refined effect to the entire website. To get started, go ahead and download the starter code using the link in the description down below. Make sure to run npm install to get all the dependencies. And with that, let's jump in. Here we have the starter code for the project. It's just a blank one-page website built using next.js and styled with Tailwind. A couple of things I wanted to highlight in the starter code before we jump in. The first is all of the media that's required, so photo, video, SVGs are already included in the starter code in the public folder. Second is I've already gone ahead and added in the next config an SVG loader, as you can see here. That will make it much easier for us to work with SVGs in our project. And finally, I've gone ahead and just added a simple styling here in the global CSS file that will just set the default text color on the website to be white. And with that out of the way, let's jump in and start by working on the top hero section with the background video. So for this, I'm going ahead and create a new component. And in this component, which I'll create a folder for, called components, and I'll call this component the hero section, tsx, create a new functional component. And let me just go then into the index file. And instead of the placeholder content we have here, we'll go ahead and bring in the hero section component. All right, so now let's work on building this hero section. So I'm going to first replace this div here with a section tag. Inside the section tag, we're going to do some quick styling of the section. So I'm going to do a position relative because we're going to do some absolute positioning here in a second. Go ahead and set the height to be the screen height. We'll make this flex column, and justify center. Now inside of this section, I'm going to add the navbar, but for now, I'm just going to have a placeholder for it, and we'll get back to it in a second. After the navbar, we are going to have a div for the background video, which again, for now, I will just do a placeholder for. And then finally, we'll have the actual text content that will be on screen. So let's actually go ahead and start with the background video first, since that's the most visual part of this section. So for the background video, we're going ahead and just create a div. And this div is going to have some classes. So it's going to be a position absolute, inset 0. And for those of you who haven't used inset 0 before, it essentially just sets the top, left, right, and bottom all to 0. And I'm going to set the vertical positioning, stacking, I should say, to -10. So make sure that this is at the very back of the ordering of all the components here from a depth perspective. Okay, so now inside of this div, we are going to do another div here, which we'll get to in a second. So first, let's actually do a video tag. And in this video tag, we're going to, instead of doing a source, we're going to add a separate source tag underneath it. And in the source tag, we're going to pass in source, and it will just be the video file itself. And we'll make sure we'll say the type is of type video MP4. Hit save. Okay, we have the video here. Let's first stretch the video to cover the full screen. So in this video tag, I'll add some classes, say width full, height full, and object cover, so it doesn't scale weirdly. So now this covers the whole background. Now, because we're going to put content on top of this video, I'm going to add a darkening overlay on top of this video, so it makes it a little bit easier to read any text. So above this video tag, I'm going to add another div. This will be a self-closing div. And for this div, I'm going to give it a couple styles. So I'm going to also give this a position absolute, inset 0, background to black with 30% opacity, and a Z of 10 to make sure it sits above the video tag. So now when I hit save, you can notice there's a bit of a darkening now over this video. Finally, let's add some additional properties to the video tag to actually have this start autoplaying and also loop. So I'm going to just say autoplay, muted, and loop. Now when I hit save and refresh the page, you can see that the video already starts playing and it's going to end up looping as well once it gets to the end. Okay, so that is the background video. Let's jump to the text content next. So this text content is all going to live in a div. And this div is going to have some styles. So it's going to be flex call, items center, and a gap of 24. Now inside this div, there's going to be a few different components underneath this div. So first we're going to do another div. And this div is going to have an h1 that says experience the draw of gravity. Underneath this h1 is going to be a p tag, which says redefining the feature of SUVs. And I'm also going to add a button that's going to say stay informed. All right, so that doesn't look great right now. So let's go ahead and add some styles. So on this div that surrounds these three specific components, I'm going to add some styles. So I'm going to do flex call, items center, and gap of 8. Already, if I hit save there, you can see, okay, starting to bring some structure on this h1. I'm going to give it a text of 6XL for the size, a max width of 15 characters, which will make it wrap, text, center, and I'm going to give it a serif font. For this p tag, we're going to actually just go ahead and leave this alone. But for this button, I'm going to give it a background of white, text black, I'm going to make it all uppercase, going to give it some horizontal and vertical padding, and also give it some rounded corners as well. All right, so that is the first part of the text content. We are going to want to add another section of content here, which is going to display some, let's say, key features or highlights of this SUV. So what we're going to do is first, let's create the surrounding div for those elements. So class name, flex, justify between a width of 60% and a max width of 900 pixels. Now, underneath this div are going to be these kind of highlights of numbers. So instead of repeating them multiple times, I'm going to go ahead and just create them in a separate component. So I'm just going to go down here and create a new component here. We'll call it highlight item. And it's going to be a component that takes in some properties. I'm just going to correctly define what the interface is here in the component. So it's going to take a title of type string and content of type string. And it's going to take these. So I'm going to destructure these props. And then this will return a div. Inside this div will be a span that will take title and then a paragraph tag that takes the content as children. So now let's just go ahead and quickly pull in these before we style them. Here in this div, let's go ahead and add a highlight item. And the title will be projected range. And the content will be over 440 miles. You can see that go in now. I'm going to copy this 3 more times. I'm just going to update the content here. So the next one will be peak power, and it's over 800 horsepower. Next one is seating, and it's up to 7. And the final one is 0 to 60, and it is under 3.5 seconds. All right, so we have the 4 highlights here. Let's go ahead and quickly style them. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. So on this surrounding div of the highlight item, I'm going to give it flex call, items, center, and gap of 4. So that will center these 2 items. Then for the span, I'm going to give it a class of uppercase and text small. And for the p tag, I'm going to give it text of 2XL, since we want that to be standing out more. The final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some vertical spacers between these different items here. So for that, I'm going to just first go in between a couple of these highlight items. I'm just going to add a quick div. And this div is going to have height of full, width of 2 pixels, and a BG of white. And you can see here, it gives us the divider. And because of the justify between, it nicely spaces everything out for us automatically. Just go ahead and copy this divider div 2 more times so we can get dividers now for all the elements. All right, so we've gotten the content out of the way. The final thing we need to add here in the hero section is the navbar. And for that, we're going to encapsulate that in a separate file for this component. So I'm going to create a new file under components, call it navbar.tsx. Go ahead and generate with Emmet. a default one. And then I'm just going to pull in Navbar. And right now it just is Navbar. All right, let's go ahead and style this Navbar. Let me go ahead and hide this. So for this Navbar, I'm going to return a nav tag. And inside this nav tag are going to be the logo. And then I'm going to bring in a div that will have a bunch of links to other theoretical pages on the website. So let's go ahead and bring this in. So for the logo, I'm going to import the logo here at the top from the public folder. It's just called logo.svg. And because of that Webpack loader that I added in the config file earlier, we can now just directly bring this in as if we were bringing in a component, which is really nice. Right now, you actually can't see it, but it's like very tiny right now, but it is on the page, but we'll get to that in a second. And then for these links, I'm going to go ahead and add them here. So right now, I'll use the next link component, and this first one will be called air, and it wants an href. So for now, we'll just give it a hash, and we'll copy this 3 more times. Gravity, experience, and shop. Okay, so you'll see them all show up here, but obviously this does not look great at all. So let's add some styles to all of this. So first, let's go ahead and style the overall nav. The first thing I want to do is position it at the very top of the page. So for that, I'm going to give it a position absolute. And this is why we actually set this whole section to be position relative, so that we can come in and set this to be absolute. Then we'll say inset of x is 0. So this means that the left and right should be set to 0. The top should be 0, should be set to the top. Height of 16. And then we'll give it some different properties here as well for styling the children positioning. So I'll give it flex, justify between items, center, a horizontal padding of 20. And let's go ahead and save. So now we position the logo here in the top left, and then the items on the right here. Let's go ahead and style the children here to make them a little bit better. So for this logo, I can pass in class name here because it's like another component. Now let's give it a width of 60. So now we can see the SVG. And then for the links, I'll give it a class name of flex and gap of 6. So it spaces them out nicely. The final thing I'm going to add is a bit of a fading gradient background so that it's dark at the very top and then fades out to the video itself. And that is actually pretty easy to do with Tailwind. So I'm just going to go to the nav. I'm just going to add BG gradient to B, or gradient to bottom, so top to bottom, from black. So the top will be black. And then the bottom will be also black, but I'll give it a black of 0. So it fades out. So now if I hit save, you'll see this nice gradient background on the nav bar nicely fades into the actual background video itself. Okay, so with that, we've finished creating the hero section. So now let's move on to adding the sections that come after this hero section. And they're all going to be pretty much the same structure, so we can just create one component and reuse it multiple times with different content. So to do that, let me just get out of these files here, and I'll create a new component, call it just section.tsx, make the placeholder, and then in this index file, I'll just pull in one copy of this section component for now. All right, so the first thing that we want to do in the section component is set up the props that we want to come in for the content. So for that, I'm going to go here at the top and just say this is a React functional component, and I'm just going to define the props interface again here directly. We want to take in an image, and we're going to say this is going to be of type static image data. And let me just go ahead and import this from next image. I'll take a tag, type string, title of type string, and a description of type string. And then I can go ahead and destructure all of these in the constructor. All right, so now let's go ahead and create the structure for the section. So this is going to be a section tag overall. In this section tag, there will be a div. This will be for the background image of the section. And then there'll be another div, and this will be for the actual content. So let's start with the overall section here and give it a couple of styles. We're going to give it a position of relative. This is because the background image is going to have to be set to position absolute, a height of screen, and a overflow hidden. And this will be for the background image when we add parallax. For the background image, I'm going to pull in a couple styles in the surrounding div first. So I'm going to give position absolute, width full, and height of 120%, and a z-index of -10. This height of 120%, I'll explain in a second why we're doing that. It's going to be for the parallax. Then I'm going to add the image itself. So I'm going to use the image, next image tag for this. The source will be image. Alt will be overview. Fill for the sizing. And then I'm also going to give it a class name of object cover. Object cover. And actually for this alt, I'm going to pass it in the title instead. Now, actually, if we scroll down, we don't see anything yet because we haven't passed in an image, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm also just going to go ahead and add the darkening image overlay that we used for the background video in the hero section as well, just to make things more legible. So this will be a div, a self-closing div. Now we just give it class names of absolute, inset of 0, background of black with 30% opacity, and a Z of 10. So you can see that actually overlay is there, but you can see there's a missing image. So let's go ahead and actually pass in some properties to a section so we can see it. So I'm going to go ahead actually first and import some images at the top here that we'll be using. So as you can see here, this is just directly importing some of the JPEGs from the public folder directly here. And then what we can do is in section, we can go ahead and pass some properties. So I'm going to pass in image, BG overview. The tag is overview. And for the title and description, I'm going to go ahead and just copy in what I have from the final project just to save some time. And so now when I hit save, you can see that the image does show up here. Now let's go ahead and add the text content as well to the section. So on the second div for the text content, I'll give it a class name of flex call, gap 4, and padding of 24. And inside here, I'm going to give it a span tag, which will have the tag, h1, which will have the title, and a p tag, which will have the description. Now let's add a little bit more styling to these. So for the span, I'm going to give it uppercase and text extra small. For the h1, I'm going to give it font serif, text 4XL, and max width of 25 characters for forcing a text wrap. And then on the p tag, I'm going to just say max width of 50 characters to again force it to text wrap. All right, so now we have all the content here of this section done. Let me just go ahead and quickly add in the other sections as well with their content. All right, so I've just gone ahead and copied in the content for the remaining sections as additional section components. So now if I scroll down, we can see the additional sections also come in. All right, so the next thing that we're going to want to do here is add the parallax scroll effect for the background images on each of these sections. Now, this is where I mentioned we added this height of 120%. Now, why is that? So the idea with parallax scrolling is as you scroll, the image that you want to have this parallax effect for, you also want to move it yourself at a different rate than the rate of scrolling. So that gives that nice impact of the image seeming to move more slowly in a sense. And so what we're doing here is if I hadn't set this height to be 120% and it was just height 100%, so the whole image comes in, if we want to try to move it at all vertically, there won't be any more picture left to show. It will just be white. So that's why we need to blow it up a little bit so that it's scaled up a little bit to 120%. So we have a little bit of room to scroll within the viewport of this section. That's why we set the height to be 120%. Now, we're going to move these background images using Framer Motion and tie it to the scroll positioning of each of these sections. We are going to use a use scroll hook from Framer Motion to help with this. So the first thing that we need to do for using this hook is we need to first get a ref to this section. And so we're going to create a const section ref. And we'll say use ref, and initially it will be null. And I'm going to attach this ref to the section component or the section tag, which is the parent of this component, section ref. And let me import use ref. And then what we're going to do is we're going to track the scroll progress of this specific section and how its progress is for the screen. So for this section, we're going to use the scroll by progress property that comes from the use scroll hook from Framer Motion. We can pass it a couple of properties. So first we need to give it the target, which is what do we actually want to track the scrolling of. In this case, we want to track the section itself, so you need to pass it the section ref. And the second is we need to pass it an offsite, which is going to define essentially what do we call 0% progress and what do we call 100% progress. So in this case, we're going to say 0% is when the start of this section is at the end of the screen, and 100% is when the end of this component is at the start of the screen. Okay, so then this gives back scroll Y progress, which is just 0 to 1. So then we can define then a vertical translation that is tied to that. So we're going to say const y equals use transform from Framer Motion, and it's going to be tied to the value of scroll Y progress, and scroll Y progress, takes a value from 0 to 1, and we want that to map to a value of, let's say, minus 20% to 10% for this Y value. And then finally, what we can just do is we can attach this value of Y as a vertical translation we should apply to the image. So I'm actually going to apply it to this surrounding div here. So what I'm going to do is make this a motion div so that we can actually use these motion values from the use transform. And then in this motion div, I'm going to go ahead and just simply add a style tag. And I'm going to say top is Y. Now I'm going to hit save. And now you'll notice that the parallax is there, because now you'll notice when I start scrolling, there you go. You'll notice that the image is also moving in the background as well. And this is now working for each individual section because each one is being tracked separately within its own component. All right, so the final thing that we want to add to this website is smooth scrolling. Now, I actually previously made a video, which I'll pop in the corner if you're interested, showing how to manually create a smooth scroll effect. But honestly, it's pretty painful to implement yourself. So typically, it's just better to leverage a library, which just makes things much easier. Now, my new favorite library for smooth scroll is a library called Lenis, which was created by an agency studio which creates websites for clients. And they just make it super easy to add smooth scroll. And we're just about to see how easy it is. So I've gone ahead and pulled up the GitHub page for the Lenis scroll library. And you'll notice if I scroll down, there is a basic setup here that they ask us to use. And all we need to do is add this code, and that's it. We're done. Now, because we're using next.js and React, we're going to need to add this to a use effect when the page loads in the index file. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go up here, and above this return statement, I'm going to simply define a use effect, and this we want to call when the page loads. So we'll give it a empty brackets as a second parameter. And all we need to do, honestly, is just copy this code on the GitHub and just paste it in here. And I'm just going to delete this event trigger. We don't need that. And then let me go ahead and import Lenis as well. And then we need to change just this function definition as well here. Because we're using TypeScript, it's complaining that this time doesn't have a type. So we're just going to say it's any explicitly. So then it will stop complaining. Surprisingly enough, that's it. Back to the web page. And now if I start scrolling, look at that. We have smooth scroll just like that with just a few lines of code. So with that, we've finished creating this landing page. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And on screen now is another video for you to check out. And I'll see you in the next video.